Imagine buying your dream home, and a few years later, learning that a 450 megawatt natural gas-powered data center could be built less than a mile away. Not because residents approved it, but because the project was divided into two smaller pieces during the approval process. That is what's happening with Project Valara in Spartanburg County. Valara Holdings, a subsidiary of the New York investment firm Northmark Strategies. Project Valara is expected to become one of the largest data center developments in South Carolina. County documents describe approximately $2.76 billion in planned investment. Some people think that data centers create a lot of jobs, but in reality, during the construction phase, they tend to relocate those temporary construction jobs from other sectors, such as residential construction, instead. Also, there is no guarantee that local companies will secure the contracts. According to county and incentive documents, the completed project is expected to create roughly 27 permanent jobs. 27 jobs for nearly $3 billion project. Fast food restaurant can employ more people. Residents are not only talking about jobs, they are worried about something much bigger. There are around 1,300 homes within a mile of this data center, and 15,000 homes and 10 schools within 5-mile radius. A lot of them will be subject to light, sound, and air pollution 24/7. Here when things become controversial. According to a lawsuit filed by the South Carolina Environmental Law Center on behalf of nearby residents, Project Valara was submitted to Spartanburg County as two separate minor land development applications. The lawsuit argues that when viewed together, they are actually one giant development. According to the complaint, treating the project as two separate minor developments meant it did not go before the Spartanburg County Plan Commission for the type of review that a major development could require. Now I would like to read out a few parts from the lawsuit. Upon information and belief, the public at large first learned of Valara's data center in early 2025, when the Post and Courier reported that Spartanburg County Council had held an initial reading and vote to approve a tax break for an undisclosed company, referred to under the codename Project MOC-1. The Post and Courier further reported then Councilman, now Commissioner David Britt, stated that the project was not a data center and would not use more power than the site's existing facility. In April 2025, Spartanburg County approved a fee in lieu of tax pilot agreement for the project. We will talk about this type of agreement later in this video. Shortly after receiving this tax break from the county, Valara applied to the South Carolina Department of Environmental Services, DES, for a Clean Air Act permit, authorizing air pollution from approximately 50 megawatt of on-site power generation. On July 18, 2025, DES issued a public notice announcing a comment period for Valara's draft Clean Air Act permit. In the draft permit, DES explained that the facility will construct a data center, and this data center is powered by 24 kilowatt natural gas generators. Just 2 months later, On September 17, 2025, DES issued a final air permit authorizing construction and operation of the 24 kilowatt gas-fired generators, totaling approximately 50 megawatt of power generation, and the associated air pollution. In December, just 3 months after receiving this initial air permit, Valara contacted DES about a modification to its air permit to authorize air pollution from an additional 400 megawatts of on-site gas-fired generation at the site. This represents an 8-fold increase over Valara's original air permit. Upon information and belief, Valara's plan to construct a total of 450 megawatt of on-site generation was never disclosed to the public. A 450 megawatt power plant far exceeds the Siting Act's 75 megawatt threshold, and it is comparable to or even larger in size than various power plants owned by regulated utilities in South Carolina, which underwent Siting Act review. According to the draft permit, the power plant's on-site generation will emit approximately 220 tons per year of nitrogen oxides, 201 tons of carbon monoxide, 158 tons of particulate matter, 9.5 tons of sulfur dioxide, 60 tons of volatile organic compounds, and 19 tons of hazardous air pollutants, including 9.4 tons of formaldehyde. Upon information and belief, these estimates, if correct, mean the power plant could be the largest industrial source of nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, particulate matter, sulfur dioxide, and formaldehyde in Spartanburg County, based on the comparison to the United States Environmental Protection Agency's 2020 National Emission Inventory data. It could also be a top 10 source of particulate matter pollution in the entire state, far exceeding the last reported emission of the former Kohler facility that operated on the site. Also, according to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's 2020 data, formaldehyde is a known human carcinogen. Particulate matter pollution can increase the risk of hospitalization due to heart attack, pneumonia, cardiovascular issues, or in some cases stroke or cancer. And nitrogen oxides can worsen ground-level ozone, better known as smog, and is associated with respiratory health effects. Don't forget about 15,000 homes within 5-mile radius. Now let's talk about Texas, because this part is hard to ignore. County Council approved what's called a FILE, a fee in lieu of taxes agreement. That agreement reduces the project's property tax assessment ratio from the standard industrial rate of 10% down to 4%. For comparison, this 4% assessment ratio is the same ratio used for owner-occupied homes in South Carolina. This deeply discounted 4% rate is locked in for a 40-year term, shielding the company from the localized property tax hikes. And it doesn't stop there. County documents also approved something called a special source revenue credit. In simple English, it allows Valara to directly use a portion of its remaining tax payments to offset its own infrastructure and development costs. To put the scale of these savings into perspective, a nearby proposed $3 billion data center in Spartanburg County, Project Sparrow, was projected to pay roughly $250 million in local taxes over 30 years under an identical 4% filed structure. Without the tax break, standard industrial tax rates would have required them to pay well over $500 million. Here is the question many residents are asking. If a project is receiving lower taxes and infrastructure assistance, shouldn't the public have a large voice before it gets approved? Whether you support Project Valara or oppose it, one thing is clear. This isn't just about one project. Artificial intelligence, cloud computing, and online services are driving an enormous demand for new data centers across the United States. South Carolina wants to compete for those investments. What do you think? Should the project this large receive an additional public review? Or is the current process working exactly as intended? What is more important, health or investment? Let me know in the comments.